Welcome, all of you. As I've just said to some of you, this is part one of two. We ran the first two part ones in July. Take up and interest was so positive that I thought we should rerun it again. And I'm really grateful that all of you have felt that you wanted to hear what we've got to say. There are two sessions of the part two coming up at the end of November, beginning of December. If you are able to enroll onto those, that will be great. It's unlikely to be tomorrow, but on Monday, I will send the recording of this out, the link to the recording, and I will send the invite to the second parts. So if you are able to attend that, they'll come out together. Okay, so let's get started. Right, what we're going to do today, this afternoon, is quite intensive, and I'm afraid there is a bit of an information overload. We are aware that your role is increasingly important to us and to the careers leaders and colleagues in your schools that you represent. So what we want to do is look at what the duties of a careers link governor could be and might be, and the other career related roles in your schools, because some of you may not be aware of quite how embedded careers is within your schools and the number of people that are involved to deliver that. We're going to look at the key strategic documents that all came out the end of last academic year, which are driving forward the work that we do, and they're having a massive impact. And I will talk about some of that impact as we go through. We'll look at Gatsby and the other quality tools and awards that your schools will be using, and that some of them will be accredited towards, so that you understand what's going on in terms of quality in the background. We'll think about what questions you can start asking of your colleagues in schools to start probing and challenging and raising quality. And then there will be a little bit of a personal improvement plan. That sounds a lot more impressive than it actually is. What we're going to be looking at is the sorts of questions that you can start asking in schools. And we know that those questions are being asked because, as I said, the take up of your involvement amongst your colleagues in our meetings has been massive in the last half term. So what actually does a careers link governor job description involve? I think job description is probably a bit of a weird title, but it's really it can be what you want it to be in some respects. So the link governor should be the person who takes the strategic interest in how careers education and guidance and employer engagement is taking place within your schools and colleges. If I use the word schools, and I've got colleagues from colleges, I apologise, it's just easier just to say schools all the time. So the role should also be looking to make sure that the minimum statutory requirements, which are contained in the documents that I'm going to go over later, are happening, and that you can be some form of link between the work-related learning and the academic learning that your students will be taking on a daily basis. There isn't that many versions of a job description for a careers link governor. So some of that bit you might be doing, some bits you might be doing extra. So what sort of things could that actually mean in delivery terms? So the most obvious one would be to support your nominated careers lead by attending regular meetings. I know that started to happen in some of the schools that I work with, and I know for a fact that the careers leads are finding your support and your challenging quite exciting and interesting, and they're grateful for that support. That means that you can then go back and report to your governing body colleagues on how your school is progressing, how it's meeting the strategic priorities, how it's meeting the pupils' learning and career decision mating. Oh my Lord, that's a slip of the word. Careers learning and careers decision making, and what your policies say you should be delivering are actually being achieved. So how can you do that? Well, you can facilitate that by the appointment of business community school members, associate. You can link up with partners, with local businesses, and all of that ensures that your governing body is getting the most up-to-date information about what should be being delivered, and that those messages will come via us and via your careers leader. So all in all, we want you to help encourage your schools towards extremely good quality careers provision, and help them improve what's called Gatsby Benchmarks, which some of you may have heard of and some of you may not have done, but we'll cover what the Gatsby Benchmarks are later as well. So how does that work? I'm wondering whether, Tracy, do you want to take over and just do this little bit?
Yeah, sure. Just to give you an overview of the network and Enterprise M3. Enterprise M3 covers across Hampshire and Surrey. It's not as clear cut because we are a local enterprise partnership, and there are 38 nationally, and we have other LEPs bordering us. As a result, we don't have the whole of Hampshire and we don't have the whole of Surrey, but this map gives you a view of what that is. And the delivery of the Careers and Enterprise Company programme is delivered by those LEPs. So there are 38 delivery partners delivering this programme, and the programme is about building networks. So as an example, building networks of yourself, school governors, we're building networks of employers, all with the same view of helping young people to be better informed about their future career choices and prepared for the world of work. And that's the overall objective. So it's about that collaboration and building the network. Building networks. Since, oh gosh, I'm testing myself now, 2015, end of 2015, start of 2016, the government put in place a career strategy, which hadn't been in place, and gave the schools the Gatsby benchmarks, which is something for them to understand where they're at and know where they want to be, so they can understand what the gaps are and work with us and work with all the stakeholders involved to make that positive impact and positive outcomes on young people. Within that career strategy, the key element is the careers leader, but they are only one part of this whole element, which Jan mentioned. And so, you will see going further through this, there are many people playing their role in this, and the careers leader is kind of the person that should be bringing this together, and not the person solely responsible for it. And as Jen said, as a school governor, it's very key in your role because it is part of the Ofsted requirements. So you obviously want to know what the careers leader is doing and where careers are playing a part in the future of your young people past the school gates and into the future.
Okay. So, I mean, do you want to cover this as well, Tracy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to. So how does it work? We have a team. The delivery that we have in the Enterprise M3 area is we have 5 education engagement enterprise coordinators. It is a mouthful. And we have 1 employer engagement education enterprise coordinator, and then myself, which looks after the whole team. And the basis of that is that we can work with the schools and colleges, understand where they're at by doing the compass evaluation, which will come in later on, which is based around the Gatsby benchmarks. And so the school can evaluate where they're at and understand their planning within that. Now, it's really key to understand that careers isn't separate to all of this. It's part of the school improvement plan. It's part of the school priorities, because a young person, their health and well-being is always better if they have a positive outlook on the future, which careers can bring that to them. And attendance and behaviour can be improved by careers information if they know and understand why they're there. What is that subject going to do for me? Where is it going to take me? And so that's where the education side comes in. And then we have the employer engagement, where we are working to recruit business volunteers who are our enterprise advisors, who will work with the school to bring in their business network, and not only that, their business knowledge, so that the school can really relate that to what they're trying to do in their careers side of things. From a LET perspective, obviously it's built into our skills activities and priorities. You know, how can we maintain the growth of the economy in our area? How can we ensure that employers are receiving young people with the right skills and qualifications? So it's informing that information continually, as well as the employers that we're working with and the education providers. There are some really great education providers out there. Some are government funded, some are chargeable, but there are the options there for the school. And it's really about, you know, that investing in programs, and whether it be financially or just the resources that we have, to ensure that we get the best outcomes for young people. They are ultimately what we're all working for, is the outcomes for those. It's great because also as a network, we take best practice and sharing information, which is part of all this network, particularly with careers leaders. And actually from our last Careers Link Governor conversation, it was said, can we have a network? Can we have this forum kept going? Because we'd like to share information and best practice, and it's really moving the network forward. Over to you, Jan.
Okay. There's another one. Look, you can do that one too.
Okay. Yep. Happy to do that.
This is almost like we rehearsed this.
So, in terms of the whole structure, you know, again, the pupils, the students are the central point of all of this, and we work with all of the stakeholders to really get the best outcomes for the young people. Now, that's kind of the structure, but it goes further afield. You know, we are now looking at the parent network as well, and we have a fantastic Facebook page which is providing parents with information. We've got an ambassador platform where parents can ask questions. You know, we're just trying to open up all the options so that young people who are supported, who aren't supported, you know, there are different solutions to meet different needs, and that's one of the benchmarks, is addressing the needs of the individual pupil. But we work with the governing body, like yourself as the Link Governor, senior leadership team, the careers leader in red there. You know, again, they are really key to all of this, but they are not, they cannot do this on their own. So this is where everything comes together, and they can work with the enterprise advisor to really bring the world of work into the school. And the enterprise coordinator there is to really be that resource, information, guidance, to help bring all of this together as well.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Tracy. I think you've probably been slightly bombarded by all of the, almost trying to put this into practice. What does it look like on the ground? Tracy's just said that it doesn't sit just with the careers lead. And in each of your schools, there will be a multitude of different people who are all responsible for careers at some level or other. On this lovely bright coloured mosaic, there are different names of different roles. Can you just have a look through and see how many of those job titles you recognise from your own schools and colleges, and put it into the chat?
3, 4.
3s and 4s. Okay.
Yeah.
That's about average. And I'm going to show you another slide in another second, which every time I open this next slide, it slightly blows my mind. But I want to reassure you that the chances are, in most of your schools, you're going to have more than 3 of those roles in your schools as we speak. Most of your schools have got an enterprise advisor. All of them will have all of you have an enterprise coordinator. You're obviously here as Careers Link governors, so that takes it up to 3. you will have a deputy head with responsibility for careers. Potentially more, it'll come under PSHE rather than necessarily having careers in the title. You will have a careers leader who is sometimes the same person as a deputy head. So one of your first action points to take away from this session is to go back and speak with your careers leader and find out how embedded careers is within your schools. And do you have any careers curriculum ambassadors? Do you have any student careers ambassadors? Who's responsible for work experience? Is it the careers lead? Is it somebody that might be a volunteer? Because that happens sometimes. All of those roles take place within your schools and colleges, and some of them will be one person, some of them will be one person covering a multitude of roles. I'm going to show you the next slide, which, as I say, tends to blow my mind slightly. It is very, very busy, and I think it very well represents the responsibilities that a careers leader is being asked to manage across all of our schools and colleges. And when you actually look at the mosaic that I just showed you with the people, and then you look at the range of tasks and responsibilities that a careers leader is being asked to manage and deliver strategically and operationally, it shows you quite how widespread, and how embedded across the school the careers programme can become. Now, obviously, you're going to find it really hard to read all of that, and we don't have time. But when you get this slide pack, I would spend time with that, because you could almost audit with your careers leader if there are any parts of that line of responsibility that they're particularly struggling with, and that you can particularly support them with. Because if you think that in some schools our careers leaders are librarians, and then we go all the way up to some schools where they're deputy heads and deputy principals of major colleges, their accountability can depend quite a lot on their actual job role. Some of them didn't come in as careers leaders. Some of them have been given the role either as a promotion or because they sometimes were in the wrong place at the right time. They might argue that it was actually the right time at the wrong place. But have a look at that afterwards. But I would use it as a discussion document when you have one of your first chats with your careers lead. Before I move on, I can see that there's typing going on. Is there anybody want to raise any questions about that first little bit?
Liz put in whether the slides would be shared, and I've just confirmed that they will be shared.
Yes, they will be.
But at the moment, no other questions.
That's fine. So what I've done, or what we've done at the beginning stage, is almost give you the basis of what the role is and the responsibilities that the people who you'll be working alongside or supporting alongside, what their input into your school or college actually it meets, and you can see it is incredibly wide. So in terms of the governor engagement, why is it really important? So in conclusion from that first little bit, it supports the strategic collaboration that's going on across your schools. It brings your role can bring everything together, and you can be the critical eye, you can be the supporter, you can be the friend, you can almost be the police officer, making sure that everything that is written down from the government is actually being undertaken and delivered within your schools. You can look at the different needs and expectations from the different people and different perspectives, because you do have almost an external viewpoint, which is really useful, and become that critical friend for your careers lead and your careers colleagues. You can bring in the knowledge of labour market information, which is what LMI stands for. You can bring in your business and your own working experience about the sorts of things that are going on in the world of work, because most teachers will accept that if they have worked in industry, it hasn't been for a while, and a large percentage of teachers have never worked outside of education. So getting that viewpoint of what it's like in the real world is also a really useful and valuable thing that they will look to you for. You can also take an interest in all of the different stakeholders that Tracy's mentioned that we're talking with all the time. And the last bit is to challenge. If Ofsted come into your schools, and we know that they're in the area at the moment, and I'm going to deal with Ofsted later, they will be coming in to challenge that you are meeting the requirements of the statutory documents. So it is your role to challenge to make sure that you are attaining those requirements. Right, I'm going to just give you a little bit of history. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but some of the reasons about why we are where we are at the moment in terms of career education is historical. And I always think it's really helpful if you know why we've got to where we've got to. Because it has literally happened in the last 10 years. And there are a lot of different parts of a school curriculum which haven't had the major changes and differences that we have had within the careers part of our work in the last 10 years. If we jump to 2013, when it mentions the Gatsby benchmarks, Gatsby benchmarks were put in place because the CBI felt that young people were not coming into science, engineering and maths type subject areas and being well prepared enough for work. So the government commissioned Gatsby benchmarks to be initiated, and they became our evaluation tool. And you will hear us call them Compass. So when we talk about a Compass evaluation report, it's basically an online version to create the Gatsby benchmarks percentage scores, which we then look at as an improvement and as a tracker when we're speaking with your careers leader. So we use that as a tool to find out where you are across all parts of the strategic parts of your programs. If we jump to 2018, the first careers development framework was created by our industry support network, which is called the CDI, which is the Careers Development Institute. And what the framework did is it looked at careers programs from the student's point of view to make sure that they were receiving the stuff in the classroom that they actually need to be able to manage their own individual careers. So Gatsby tends to look at the strategic side of delivery, and the framework looks much more from the student-centered point of view. In January, we had the first skills white paper for a long time, and it's called Jobs for Skills, and it was written more for the FE sector, but it did deal with quite a lot to do with pre-18 education as well. And it gave us some hints about what was going to appear in the careers strategy. And I've just realised it still says pending on here, which I apologise for, because the careers strategy was launched on the second week before the end of last year. So it wasn't like they kept us waiting. It was due in April and it came in I think it was the end of the second week of July, just before the schools broke up. And if you look at the skills white paper, the career strategy and the CDI framework, which is what we're going to do in a minute, those three documents are now driving us forward, and they are the documents that you should be aware of, because those are the ones that your careers leaders are looking towards attaining and achieving. And all three of those, Ofsted have been instructed to look at all three when they come in and do their inspections. Before I go further forward, anybody want to ask me anything about that little run through of history? I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't, to be fair.
Yes,
Yeah,
Could you just confirm the 3 documents that Ofsted would
I'm
require
just
us?
going to show you them.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm
Lovely.
going to give you pictorial evidence.
Beautiful.
So
Thank
you can actually see what they look like.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Paul is just frantically typing, so if you can
Okay.
bear with one moment. Paul Collier. No, he stopped. It's always difficult when you...
I was going to ask exactly the same question.
Oh, you see, I'm ahead of all of you. Anybody would think I'd done this before. So in summary, before I show you the documents and the content, we have reached to what I would call an improving picture, because there are a variety of different things that we can, I hate to use the word measure, but there are different things that we can look at to see and set achievement and to look at quality. One of them is Investors in Careers, which tends to be a qualification, well, an award that the post-18 sector looks to achieve. Sorry, no, I'm talking complete rubbish. Investors in Careers is a qualification that schools get, and it's been taken over by the Quality and Careers Awards. I don't think that, looking at the schools that are here, I don't think that we've got any schools that are currently going through Quality and Careers Award. But if you do, your careers leader can tell you all about it. I used to be a Quality and Careers Award assessor, so I can give the people that are going through it a little bit more extra support than some of my other colleagues, because, as I say, I've been an assessor. And the qualification that I originally started talking about is Matrix, I got Matrix and Investors in Careers the wrong way round. Matrix is a qualification which looks at how people who go into colleges and post-18 providers get customer service and information advice and guidance. So it looks at the sorts of things that a student support office might do, and quite a lot of government funding within the FE sector is reliant on colleges having the Matrix Award. And then the last 2 on this list is Gatsby Benchmarks and the CDI Framework. So I'm going to move on now to those documents. So Gatsby Benchmarks, if you haven't heard of Gatsby Benchmarks, can you just put a yes into the chat so I know what level of understanding you all have?
Sorry, if I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, or if you have or you haven't, just put yes or no. It's probably easier. And then I can get some form of idea about what you do know.
We've got some yeses,
Good.
a no.
Okay.
Christine
Yes.
has worked with it, so we know
Yes.
that. And Paul Friend, I'm going to guess, is saying yes, he's heard of it, but would like more detail.
Okay.
And yeah, majority is a yes, but I would say there is the caveat of heard of it, but
Okay.
probably not in detail.
Okay. What I'm thinking of is probably after Christmas is the next training session that I might run for you all, is how you can use Gatsby as a development tool alongside your careers lead, because what I'm doing as an enterprise coordinator, whenever I meet the careers governor and the careers lead together, I'm encouraging the careers lead to do a compass evaluation, which produces Gatsby benchmarks at those meetings. So from your points of view, it would almost be more helpful that you know a bit more about it before you're sitting in a room and we're going through it online and you're thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm going forward. I think probably a half an hour session after Christmas about Gatsby would be helpful for you all. But just as a brief overview, there are 8 Gatsby benchmarks. Each of them look at a different aspect of a careers programme. From EM3, Enterprise M3, who Tracy and I work for, we focus on benchmark 1, benchmark 5 and benchmark 6. But if I'm working with a careers leader, when I'm going into schools, I would be looking at all of them when we do a compass. But our enterprise advisors, of which I know there are a few on our call, they've also been asked to focus on 1, 5 and 6. So what 1 does is I talk about 1 being the engine for the programme. So if 1 isn't in place, which has the policies, the programme, the evaluation, the voice of SLT, it measures how much of all of those things are in place within your schools. If they don't exist, it would be very hard for a school to be able to deliver a careers programme. Because if you don't have a policy and you don't have a plan, how do you know what you're delivering and trying to achieve? How can you measure success if you haven't got something to start with? So Gatsby Benchmark 1, from your point of view, would be something that I would hope that you would look to focus on. 2 looks about how students get access to up-to-date information about the labour market, and it looks at what statistics, how accurate the information that students are giving on salaries, growth sectors, the sorts of things that they might get in the classroom about how subjects might be useful to them in the world of work. 3 looks at addressing the needs of each pupil. So do the students get involved in identifying what they want as part of their careers programme? Are they asked for their evaluation about it? Are there records kept so that they know what careers elements that they've actually experienced? 4 looks at careers within the curriculum. So how is it being taught within the classroom? Do your teaching staff know that sometimes they're actually teaching about careers? Because they might not call it that, they might call it something completely different. So we would be looking to audit what each of the subject teachers are doing, and if there is a careers element to that, then the careers leader is able to support them to make sure that they've got up-to-date information when they're teaching in the classroom. 5 and 6 are to look about are dealing with the encounters that students have with employers, and 6 looks at experiences of the workplaces. Now 5 and 6 in the last 2 years have been a struggle for some schools, and obviously a lot of the teaching and a lot of experiences had to be virtually, but schools are opening up now, and on the call one of our EAs, David, has done the most amazing job at supporting the school that he works within to have their first careers fair face-to-face in 3 weeks' time, I think it is. And he has spent a lot of time contacting local employers and getting them to attend the careers fair. So those are the sorts of things that you might want to ask your EA to support you with, but just having that opening of the door and allowing employers back in again has been quite exciting for a lot of careers leaders, because we've had a lot of careers leaders who have never worked within a face-to-face environment. They've taken on the role whilst it was fully virtual, and all of a sudden all these opportunities are coming at them, and we have been inundating them with offers. 7 looks at encounters with FE and HE. And that is increasingly important with something which I'm going to talk to you about called the Baker Clause, which comes on later on into the presentation. It also looks at, are we getting information about apprenticeships out to your students, or are most of their transition information just basically focusing on what is on at the local college? And the lastly is personal guidance. That is, are your students getting access to an independent, impartial, sometimes employed outside of the school or college, sometimes employed by the school or college careers advisor? And we'll come on to that right at the end. Is that enough of a whistle-stop tour of the Gatsby benchmarks? Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on to the next part? No? You asked what the key strategic documents are. Well, the ones that came out in January, April and July last year are on the screen now. The Skills for Life, Lifelong Learning for Opportunity and Growth. That is the first one that came out in January. I've got a slide in a minute about what the content is. Then we had the CDI framework, which came out in April. And then, as I say, right at the end of July, the long-awaited, very outstanding document called the Careers Guidance and Access for Education and Statutory and Training Providers, which we call the Statutory Guidance, came out in July. So the Skills for Life, the headline targets for that, and obviously these are all going to be on your slides, so you will have copies of this. So it underlined the importance of Gatsby. It talked about lowering the age range to year 7 for schools to have independent careers guidance and to have careers programmes in place for year 7. It looked at the importance of data for careers information and guidance, and I will talk about data in a minute. Ofsted, the importance of them is throughout the document, and it also started to talk about the money and the support that's going to be put in place, that is in place now, for careers leader training, which I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So those were the main headline targets, and they hinted at what was to come within the statutory guidance later on in the year. And when it came out in July, it was basically 4 months late because we'd been told it was going to come out in April. For the first time, it brought together the careers guidance and education information for schools and colleges in one overarching document. There'd always been one for colleges, there'd always been one for schools. All of a sudden, they're together. However, the long-awaited expectation that year 7 was going to be brought online was missed out. And it was almost like an error. And I think actually it probably was, because they later admitted that it had been missed out and that all of the implications of that are now going to be postponed until September 22. However, if you are working with a school and you're looking at putting into place or developing your careers programme, I would really strongly recommend you start thinking about year 7 now, if you don't already, because in September, year 7 will be part of the statutory requirement. So if you can start planning for year 7 now, that's obviously going to help things when you get to the end of the academic year. The biggest headline target of everything, though, is the prominence that has been given to something called the Baker Clause. And the Baker Clause is the title of, how can I put it? There is a requirement for schools and colleges to make sure that every young person up to the year 13 is given equal information about all of the transition points open to them at the end of year 11 and year 13. So a careers programme should give equal weighting to local colleges, to apprenticeships, to work-based learning providers, to their own sixth form. So there shouldn't be any weighting in the amount of weighting with WEIGHT rather than weighting. There shouldn't be any weighting to one of those transition points in negatively to the others. And when it comes to Ofsted, we know that Ofsted have been told to look at the impact of the Baker Clause. I hinted that there is going to be a part 2 of this session, and part 2 is going to look at the importance of the Baker Clause and the outcomes of some of the inspections that we already know have taken place in the area. I think we've had 4 of our schools now who have had Ofsted in since September. I know of another 6 of mine who are all expecting Ofsted to arrive between now and Easter. So it is a very hot topic out there at the moment. Excuse me. And my email box is full of schools, SLT members of schools, asking me for extra information about Ofsted. So if that applies to you and your school, please can you come along to part 2, because I'm going to focus on that more than I've got the time to do today.
We have a
So-
question. Sorry,
Yes.
Liz has asked a question.
I mean, I'm fascinated by this really in a way. I'm way more familiar with post 16, although at the moment, obviously, I'm a governor with a secondary school up to year 11. I'm just wondering, you know, if Ofsted is taking on this responsibility of checking this, is there going to be a need for things like matrix assessments? Because it seems to me they're bringing so much more into the requirement through Ofsted that those individual measures are going to become redundant.
I think matrix measures something completely different in terms of, you know, what matrix does within what you are being awarded for matrix is slightly different to what the Baker Clause compliance would be looking to be achieved. I don't want to. Can I have that call with you separately?
Yeah.
Only because I mean,
Yeah.
I know I used to be a matrix assessor as well, so I know the differences between the two, and there are completely different ways that you can measure compliance with the Baker Clause to what a matrix assessor would look at, and I don't think that they would be coming in and looking at Baker Clause.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
That's fine. So, as I say, Baker Clause I'm also going to cover in part 2, because it is something that is, I think it would be the responsibility of a careers governor, because you can only prove compliance with the Baker Clause by looking at data and looking at and evaluating the impact of your careers programme on your students. And some of that almost needs to be done by somebody completely impartial and independent, which is an ideal role for a careers link governor to take on. Going to jump down the list. So again, confirmation of Gatsby and looking at an improvement or being able to explain if things have dropped down a bit, why they've dropped down again, and what developments you're going to put in place to try and get your schools back up again. Recognising the virtual world that we've lived in for the last 2 years, there is an understanding that a balanced and blended approach going forward may be the best opportunities for your students, and quite a lot of our schools have decided to take that on board and are going to continue to do blended, which means virtual and face-to-face. And then the last bit is all about encouraging local authorities, colleges, schools, and anybody else to start working together to collate and collect destination data, because that is one of the easiest ways to prove Baker Clause compliance. And again, that is not something that I can cover in this session, it's just too in depth. But all of my schools, all of you who represent my schools, it is a conversation I'm having with all of you when I'm going out, and I know that my colleagues are too. So that is the most up-to-date career strategy. When you get obviously the slides, if you really have got half an hour, then you want to look at the specific pages to do with careers. I can, if you email me, I can tell you which sections that you need to look at, so you don't read the whole lot, because there is a lot of stuff that's got nothing to do with careers, especially on the FE one. And then last but not least, I've put on here the Revised Cdi Framework. Now, the framework, as I showed you in that history picture earlier on, when it originated, there were 17 different learning areas. They've beautifully condensed them down to 6. And what the CDI framework does is it maps out the careers learning journey that each student should either have access to or go through, so that when they finished education at whatever point in their lives that is, they've got the individual tools that they need going forward to be enabled to manage their own careers and their own career planning. Now, I haven't got time to go through all of those, but if any of you want to, I can cover those on a separate call at another time. When I'm speaking to my schools, I look at it, if they've got 100% across their benchmarks and they've got all the strategic stuff in place, without the framework being audited as well, they're only looking at delivery from one point of view. The learning areas look at it much more with the student as being the centre of the process, rather than as I'm not saying an outcome, but Gatsby benchmarks don't look at the student in quite the same way that the CDI framework does. We also know that when this was launched in April, Ofsted had been given training on the CDI framework. I know that from national feedback, some Ofsted inspectors have been going in and looking to see whether schools have been doing the framework. It really depends how developed and how far ahead your programs are, whether it is a good time to start looking at the framework or not. And I do it very much on a case-by-case basis as I'm meeting my careers leaders, because there are some schools who actually the framework really suits. If they've got programs where it has completely been written around the student and they want to measure success against that, the impacts for the students, the framework is an excellent way of measuring that impact. Okay, right. It's a good point to say that with all of this stuff that's been going on in the background, career support is definitely improving. When 10 years ago, when it was taken out of local authority responsibility and it went to the schools and colleges, I think all of us, the reason that we're all here is that some schools and colleges basically opted out, and some of the delivery and some of the work that students were receiving was quite poor. Since Gatsby has been around to be able to, or Compass has been around to be able to measure improvement, you can see that across all benchmarks, every single aspect of programs is improving, and that is across the country. That's not just down here, which is great. And, you know, that's what makes us all do our jobs. So in summary, what do we know? We know that head teachers have embraced the careers leader role. I don't think we have a school at the moment that doesn't have a careers link. Careers guidance is becoming embedded across schools. Some schools have got more work to do on that to identify how it's embedded, but it is happening. It's just not all teachers call it careers. They might call it something completely different. The workforce is highly engaged and is making a difference. All of the different people that are responsible for delivering careers education, which goes back to that slide with the coloured tiles on it, everybody is working really hard to make sure that our young people benefit. The Gatsby benchmarks are the game changer, and they are the measurement tool that we can look at to make sure that that's happening. And where careers leaders are operating, the Gatsby benchmarks are getting higher. Okay. Right. So, summary, we've looked at all the statutory stuff. We've looked at all the drivers. We've looked at all of the quality measures that are in place that you and, you know, if you go to your careers leader and ask for any of that stuff or anything that ties into any of those things, they will all know what you're talking about. So it's not as though you're going to be going in there and asking them about things that they don't know. So by all means, those are the sorts of questions that I would start thinking about formulating. I am going to give you a potential list of questions later. So I will briefly go over Ofsted. I said I wasn't, but there is just a little bit that I'm going to do, and then we're going to pick it up into how it has looked in EM3 in the official part 2, which is later on this month. So In terms of where careers sits, it sits within the personal development part of the Ofsted inspection, and Ofsted inspectors come in, as you know, to look at intent, how things are implemented, and impact. In terms of careers land at the moment, the word impact is as important as I've ever heard it. And I know that some of the Ofsted inspections that have done deep dives into careers, which is unheard of in all of the years that I've done this job. I can honestly tell you, I've never known of an inspector go in and do a deep dive into careers, ever, but they are, and they're doing it on the back of those documents that I showed you before the break. So what will they be coming and looking at as a broad introduction? They're going to be looking at the quality of the programme. The first thing that they will look at before they even arrive on the doorstep is they will look at the website. And if you have a website for careers with your school or college, I would go in and have a very quiet look on my own and start thinking about how many questions does it raise about what's going on in your school that an Ofsted inspector might want to ask. If you look at it and you think, actually, I don't think they're going to have to ask any questions. I think it's absolutely there. It's our shop window. We've got our destinations data on there. We've got the employers that we've linked with on there. We've got some examples of some of the sorts of provision that we've been doing. If it does all of those things, then the chances are Ofsted won't come in and want to do a deep dive. If they can't find answers to any of those sorts of questions, they're more likely to be inclined to come in and want to do a more focus on the careers element. That's the biggest feedback that we're getting so far. So the other thing that they're going to want to look at is the impact that your programme is having on your children, your students, and how you can evidence that impact. That is quite you know, a bespoke thing, because each of your schools have got impact in a different way. But I would start singing from the hilltops about what your impact is. I've had conversations with some of the schools on here, because some of your schools, as you know, are the ones that I'm responsible for. And I have basically said some of the websites are definitely lacking, and some of the EAs that are on this site know that those conversations have taken place. So if your website needs addressing, the chances are your careers leader knows already, but I would, you know, spend half an hour sometime in the next week or so and just have a look. There are certain things that you should be able to find. You should be able to find your careers policy. You should be able to find your access provider policy, which is the words which basically says what you're going to do to comply with the Baker Clause. And then you should be able to show evidence about how you're meeting both of those things. So the strategic requirements for Ofsted are the following. So the first thing is that there should be a careers leader in place. I think we're fairly happy with that. Comply with the requirements of the Baker Clause. That will be covered in part 2 of this training later on. To make sure your careers policy is published. How your careers guidance can be shown to be independent and impartial. That you have started to plan for year 7 if you don't already offer a careers education programme to year 7. That if you are in a position where you're able to start working on the CDI development framework, as I say, Ofsted are aware of it, they know it, they've been targeted to look at it. They can get access to your Gatsby benchmarks before they come in. So again, if they've got any concerns that show up from the Gatsby benchmark scores, they will know about it before they arrive. They will want to know how you're utilising your destination data. And the nice bit is that they will want to see whether you've got a careers link governor. Well, in your schools, you're all fine because you're one of them. In some colleges, we don't have careers link governors, and it isn't a statutory requirement, but it is highly recommended. So those are the sorts of things as a whistle-stop tour with Ofsted that I'm going to deal with now. Anything
Jan,
else?
we have a question
Yes, fine.
from Paul Collier.
Yeah, hi, thanks for that. It's helpful. Independent and impartial careers guidance. I guess independent from whom, and how do we demonstrate that? What does that mean?
Okay. And this gets a bit unbespoke, so I'm going to have to ask you a question. Is your careers advisor employed by the college, or do you recruit, or are they bought in from an external organisation?
No, they're full-time working for the college.
Right, okay. That isn't a problem. What Ofsted will be asking of the careers advisor is how can you prove that you are impartial? So they might look at your destination data to show that students aren't all progressing into one route, you know, that the information that they're getting is across different areas. So, you know, you've got a percentage of students that go into apprenticeships, that you're offering apprenticeship information to students, whether they sign up or not, that's up to the individual student, but that sort of offer is in place. The impartiality is sometimes more difficult to prove in schools which have a sixth form who employs their own careers advisor. And that's where the importance comes more, because if you're employing somebody in your staff and you have a sixth form, most head teachers don't want your year 11 students to leave. They want them to stay on in their sixth form. So in a college, it's less difficult to show that impartiality than it is in some schools. Has that answered, or do you want a little bit more?
No, I guess it does. I find it quite difficult to think about independence if they are part and parcel of the college, right?
Yeah, but they can still be impartial. You know, as a careers advisor, you sign up to a sort of rule of ethics, if you like, that says that you will be completely impartial with your information to the student. So on a one-to-one basis, when you have a careers interview with a student, that's easy. It's when you have group sessions.
Look, I kind of understand that, Jan, but that's a directive control, not an objective thing that you can measure, right? So that was all. I think I've got it from destination data evidence that we're not just banging on about Russell Group, you know, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
okay,
getting different employers to come in that represent across sector, finding out the information that the students actually want to be delivered within their program, not assuming that they just want to hear about one certain thing, getting student maybe undertaking some student voice sessions to make sure that the program is meeting all students' needs. Maybe having a careers student ambassador to represent each subject area that they can meet with and that you could meet with to make sure that the programs are meeting their needs. So it's integrating the ownership of the students into the program. That's your biggest measurement tool. Okay, anything else before I move away from Ofsted? Because actually, some of what you've just asked me about, Paul, is going to come on in a case study in a minute. So we are asking a massive amount of all of you. And, Tracy and, sorry, I can't remember Christine have already hinted that the Careers and Enterprise Company do some amazing resources. On this slide pack, when you get this, that is a direct link so that you can actually click from the PowerPoint straight to the link where the resources of that particular document are held. And then as an organisation, the CEC have been creating some online training sessions for you. There's also a separate section on the CEC resources area specifically for education leaders and governors. I'm not going to go into this sort of detail because when you get the slide, it signposts you to there yourself. As I say, I'm part of the national team of enterprise coordinators creating this online training set of online training modules. And they're starting to be rolled out. The confusion that I'm finding is that the CEC Careers Link Governor training and the stuff that we've put up as a region are more or less called the same. So you might get a bit confused about the difference between the two. So that's for us to make sure that you don't. But when the modules are available, I will be pinging them out to you all, and I will make sure that you know that it is CEC supported rather than EM3 supported. So there is quite a lot of things that are taking place in the background, because in the last 6 to 9 months, everybody has realised that if we really, really want to improve careers guidance and careers provision to our students, the biggest nut to crack is with SLTs. And you are our links to SLTs. So huge amount of focus is being put on board to get you included in the conversation, get you round the table at meetings. And I have already said it is starting to work with the people who were involved in the July training. I am now getting emails from them. We are seeing them attending meetings. We know that they've contacted their careers lead, and some of them have spoken to their enterprise advisors. So it is a slow burner, but in our region, I know that we are ahead of most of the country in terms of the number of careers linked governors that we've engaged with compared to most of the other regions, which is really reassuring, but there's still so much that we can do. So what can you do to empower your careers lead? We've looked at the documents, we've looked at the roles, we've looked at what the outcomes could be, we've looked at what Ofsted are going to look at. So ultimately, one of the things that you can do is keep them up to date so you can keep your governor colleagues up to date with what is going on by having ongoing meetings with your careers lead, so that you become their voice, you can become their support, and you can represent what is going on across the school by all of those different people at the most senior level that you can do in your governor meetings. Sadly, and this I hope that this is going to improve in our area, research shows that over 1/3 of careers leaders are engaging with their governors at least once a term, but only 44% are doing it once a year. So that's under half of all careers leads aren't meeting their careers governor at all. So if you go away with anything from this meeting, can I please encourage you to, have that conversation and put that meeting in the diary? Because by involving governors with schoolwork, the governing body can ensure that the careers lead is well supported and continually challenged at senior level. So when and if Ofsted come knocking on the door, they are ready to represent your school in the best way that they can. So I've got a little mini action plan here. So thoughts, careers leader and lines of responsibility. Do you know who they are? Do you know who your careers leader is? If they're a member of SLT, it's more likely that you do, and quite a few of the careers leaders represented here, I know, are at deputy and senior leadership level. Some of them aren't, but a lot of them are. Do they have a budget? Do they have resources? Does the resources involve stuff, or is the resources people? How often do you meet them? When was the careers plan submitted to governor body SLT last for approval? When's it up for review? And you know, when was it rubber stamped, or did it actually come forward into the meeting, and did you actually dissect it and look at what it said it was going to achieve? Does it comply with the requirements of the Baker Clause? Do you know how your school and college is going to be able to prove that compliance? How does it use its destination and NEAT data? Do you use that destination and NEAT data to improve what you're doing, to make sure that you learn from that? Do you speak to the students about, you know, what their impact of the impact of the programme has been on them? Because we know that from recent Ofsted inspections, they have been going and speaking to students about the impact of the journey on individual students. I think I've said to you about the importance of the careers website pages and making sure that your policy statements are viewable within 3 clicks. The bit about independent and impartial careers guidance, who is your careers advisor? How often do they come in? Have you met them? Because quite often they are sitting there doing a lot of interviewing, and they almost never escape. They are interviewing machines, and fine that they are doing interviewing, but is that the most effective way that you can that they can support your students? Would group sessions be good? Can they do some assemblies? Can they help and support parents by attending parents events? Year 7, I think I've covered that one. Mapping to CDI framework, I've mapped that one. And can you ask your careers lead to show you progression and the record of your last Gatsby benchmarks? Has Compass been done regularly? Is it being done at least termly? The worst every 6 months? I've spoken to a school today. It hasn't been done since last November, and there was lots of issues in that school, which is why it didn't get done at the end of last academic year. They've got a brand new careers lead who's come in, and he is basically like a rabbit in headlights. He is so desperate for some support from the school. So I'm going to be tracking down his careers link governor and trying to get him to get some support from somebody else. So in terms of the action plan, you may not have to do all of those things. You may already know some of them, but they would be the starting conversations that I would be having.
Sorry,
is that
Jan,
a question
there
from
is,
Lindsay?
yes. The question is, and she has, Lindsay, I'll let you, because I think you've got your hand up if you'd like to share the question.
Thank you. Yeah, the second bullet point on the left-hand side, it says, when was the career plan submitted? Is the career plan their plan based from the Gatsby benchmarks?
It could be called a school improvement plan. It can be called a school development plan. It's more like, it should be a standalone careers programme plan.
Right, okay.
So it can be any or all of those things. Sometimes it can be an appendix to the main document, to the main annual improvement plan. So it should be visible on the website. If it isn't, then I think you can go back and ask some questions. If it is visible, then have a look and see if it is a description of what's it, almost what's the word, blue sky thinking, or is there actually some targets there? I find a lot of programs do not have any measurement tools or measurement what's the word, achievement, but I can't think of the word. I've lost my train of thought. There's no measurement tools against there to find out when something has been achieved. And I'm permanently going in and saying, yeah, it says here that you want apprenticeship talks for 50% of the school. How are you going to know when that's been achieved? What tool are you going to put down to say that's been achieved, and then how are you going to evaluate that so that the process becomes cyclic? A lot of careers leaders really struggle with doing that sort of strategic thing, which you are all brilliant at. You know.
Okay, so if I spoke to the career, the careers coordinator at the school and asked for a career plan and was handed their Gatsby benchmark in a table, in a format, would I then say that's not what I'm required? Right, got it.
Yes,
that's
you would.
Brilliant. That's
You
all I
so
needed
would.
to know.
Yes,
thank you.
Because that isn't telling you what's happening in year 7, year 8. That's not telling you the impact that they want to achieve with their students. That's not showing how careers across the curriculum is being measured. That's not showing you how many employers they, which employers they want to come in and what events they want to run. Though the Gatsby benchmarks is just saying that all of those things that I've just described are happening or not, but they're not showing you how or when.
Some of the detail on the Gatsby is quite good. So I've actually seen targeted year groups for certain things. However, I will go back and I will look to see whether the measuring tools or how they're going to measure it or things like that. So that was why I was getting confused, because I was seeing quite a high level of detail on their Gatsby framework, their document that they've created.
See, they might be using the Gatsby benchmark as an improvement plan. What I would do is I would share it with your enterprise coordinator and maybe have a chat with her and have a look and see what they think, because obviously without seeing it, I don't know, but I would certainly share it with her and have a conversation between the two of you, and then maybe go in and having or having a 3-way meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else, Tracy?
No, sorry.
No. You don't have to apologise. Anyway, right, we're nearly reaching the last bit, which is great, because looking at the time, I think we might actually run to the correct time. Okay, the world of careers education and guidance has a load of jargon, and a massive amount of jargon, and we all have to be very careful about what we mean. And what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of an explanation about what the jargon means, and I'm going to use a case study to explain and illustrate what each of those words actually means in practice. So I'm going to read through a case study. So bear with me, and then after the case study, after I've read out the case study, there's a little task. So you don't need to make any notes. Just bear with me, and I'm going to do what I normally do, which is just talk. No shock there. So Chris is in year 11, and he or she, could be either, attended a talk by the fire service in school. That spurred him on, and he then spent some time going to his local fire station, where he observed what was going on, and it helped him to decide that that's actually what he wanted to do. So, armed with all of this joy and ambition, he went to his school careers library, where he met the careers leader and said, I want some information about joining the fire service. And the careers leader gave him 2 websites to go home and do some research on. After the research, he found out that the job was a lot more competitive than he thought it was going to be. But he also found out that there were some minimum entry requirements, one of which was a minimum age, and that there were certain qualifications that he needed to get in his GCSEs and potentially A-levels. So he thought the best thing to do is, I know that you've got to be really fit to join the fire service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave school at the end of year 11. I'm going to get some building work, probably through an apprenticeship, which will get me physically fit. And then once I've done that, I'll be okay to join the fire service. During his time in PSHE, in one of his lessons, he was shown how to complete an application form. So fired with his application form and his life-changing decisions, he sent it off when his parents found out what he was doing, and they were not happy, because he had then been given his GCSE levels and they were a lot higher than he found out that he needed for the fire service, and they thought that he should aim for university. There is nothing unusual in that story, nothing at all. But what I want you to do is, throughout the case study, I have just described certain parts which were what we would call careers education. There are some parts which are just purely information. There are some bits that were advice, and there were some bits that were guidance. Okay. What I would like you to do is look through and work out which of those sentences were information, advice, careers education, and careers guidance. You don't have to put it into the chat or anything. This is just something that, you know, just spend a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, and just work out which word goes with each sentence or words. And you should know this by now, Tracy. You really shouldn't need to do this.
Please don't tempt me.
So, in terms of what Chris has received so far, when he received the fire service internet sites, that was information. The leaflets that he might have got were also information. They are unlikely to have been impartial, because they will probably have been written by a fire service themselves looking to recruit people. So it's almost like the argument about why does every university prospectus have pictures of daffodils and sunshine, and why does it only ever tell you the good stuff and it doesn't ever tell you the bad stuff? So in terms of the stuff that he will have got from the fire service, that will have been information. The answers to his questions that he will have had from the careers lead and from the fire service representatives, that would have been advice, because they only know what they know. So that advice will have been based on their own knowledge, and it might also be weighted. It may also not be impartial, because, you know, they will answer the questions that they're asked. The recommendations on what to do next, that is definitely advice, because again, he could have been asking very leading questions, and if you don't offer options and alternatives, you are providing advice. You're not giving somebody full guidance, because you're giving them the answer to one thing. You're not broadening them out and giving them different options. That means that anything that the teacher, the careers lead, the parents and the fire service and the fire service employees need all comes under the banner of advice. In terms of careers education, when he sat in the classroom and he completed his application form, possibly in PSHE, possibly in business studies, sometimes in English, wherever it might be, that will have been careers education. And then when he did his work experience and job shadowing, that would have been a mix between careers education and some advice. You will see that not one of the sentences there has got the word guidance next to it, because to date, we know that he's had careers education, information, advice. He has not received guidance, because careers guidance and guidance in terms of information, advice and guidance is a skilled profession which enables the individual to get to review all of their options. It challenges the individual to make balanced decisions by looking at all of the different options in front of them and suggesting other things and other routes to get to the same place, or similar options. So similar jobs to, say, the fire service, which he may not know about, as you only know what you know. So he would have been given the opportunity to get information about other entry routes and create a strategy about to create long-term and short-term objectives, which might have included university if that is what he wanted. But you know, you've got to give people the opportunity to find out for themselves. It would also have given him some backup plans, and all of the information and advice that a careers advisor will give will be impartial. Now, I realise that some of you will find what I've put this might be a bit contentious, but when it comes to talking to a careers leader, and I have had loads of conversations, including with 2 of the schools represented here, who are saying to me, we don't have enough money to buy in a careers advisor. And you know, that means that the students in that school are getting information and advice, but they're not getting access to guidance. So I wanted to put that in so that you understand some of the terminology that we use all of the time, and that is part of this sector that you're going to be representing, because unless you realise that CEIAG is a process, and the reason that it is a process is because there is almost an order to the words, it means that you might miss out on some of the, well, especially if we go back to that map about all of the different roles that careers has within a school, managing all of that, the careers advisor and the guidance part is just one part that the careers leader has to manage. Hope it's useful. Any feedback from that? Any questions? Because I realise it could be contentious.
Nothing immediately is coming up, although Liz said it's really useful.
That's really kind, thank you. Okay, so there's your little case study on a bit of jargon. And I cannot believe this, and I don't think Tracy will either, but we're at the second but last slide, and we've got 12 minutes to go. So that's just like extraordinary, because that never happened before. So going away from this session, I hope that it's given you some thoughts and some questions that you need to answer. I've just got some sort of pointers, again, replicating what I've already said before. Go away and please book in some time with your careers leader. They will be so pleased to speak to you. Look at what careers roles are currently in place in your schools. Ask to see the most recent Compass scores. Have a little audit of the information on the website. We produce an audit tool. That's going to challenge Tracy to find that quick, which I can send out. Which I can send out. I will also send out, when I send the slides, the link to the CDI framework, which has got some amazing audit tools on there for curriculum subjects. Look into how things are evaluated that are currently underway and who is involved in that evaluation. Is it just the careers leader going, well, this is great, I never get asked about apprenticeships, therefore there's no point in me putting an apprenticeship talk on? I am not mocking, I have heard that several times. When was the last time your careers policy and development plan was last updated? And when was the last time careers was discussed at a governor's or SLT meeting?